If you're good at a sport, you're going to put a lot of time into it. You might find a lot of value in that. And it becomes very easy to say, oh, I am, and you fill in the blank with your sport. I'm a runner. I'm a good runner, or something like that. It becomes an identity. And for any one person, their sport is too small of a container to say, this is who I am. This is something you do. It's something you invest a lot of your time and emotion and energy to, but it's too small of a container to say, this is who I am.
Okay, welcome to, or welcome back to, the Altitude Project podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Madden, and through what I've experienced in running, I've developed a passion to help athletes experience fulfillment in knowing God and worshiping Him through their sport. I serve on staff with the Altitude Project, which is a summer training camp in Mammoth Lakes, California, that develops collegiate distance runners to excel in competitive running and Christian living. But it's much more than a camp. The Altitude Project has become a community of athletes that have been transformed by God's love and grace. So the purpose of these conversations is to understand how they have encountered God's love and grace, how they came to place their faith in Jesus Christ, and how their faith has influenced how they view themselves, running, and the world around them. Whether you've been a Christian for a while, or just started following Jesus, or you're simply curious about how faith and sport connect, I hope these conversations will inspire you to invest not only in your physical training, but also in your spiritual development. Now, before we introduce today's guest, if you want to join or support our community, there's a few ways you can do that. First, if you're a college runner, you can come to camp this summer. Head over to altitudeproject.com or use the link in the show notes or description to register. Second, tell your friends. Tell them about us. Share this podcast with them. Show them how to find it and subscribe. This is the best way to reach others. Finally, on the website, again, that's altitudeproject.com, you can learn more about how you can support the camp with your finances or prayers. Okay, I am excited to introduce Nick Schuetze. Nick ran for the University of Portland, and after college moved up to the marathon, running 2:16 to qualify for the 2007 Olympic marathon trials. Nick is now a volunteer assistant coach with the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and is a missionary with Athletes in Action Track and Field. If you're not familiar with Athletes in Action, their mission is to help athletes experience the hope and purpose that comes from following Jesus. So discipleship is a big part of Nick's work and mission in life. He desires to build relationships and to help people experience life abundantly. And his love for others and his hospitality comes through in this conversation as he speaks openly and honestly about his experiences. Nick talks about how our identity can get in the way of experiencing joy in our sport, and how integrating faith and sport helped him see that he is more than a runner and gave him a greater purpose. And this applies to all of us, whether you're an athlete or you're investing in your craft or something that you care about. It's so easy to identify with what we do. And when we do that, we set ourselves up to be always wanting, never fulfilled, never satisfied, because success or glory or anything apart from God can't fully satisfy us. So Nick shares some practices that you can use to put your faith and sport together so that you can experience a secure identity independent of how you perform or what others think about you. So I hope this conversation will deepen your understanding of how faith and sport connect, or at least remind you of how the gospel applies to sport or whatever you do. I'll warn you that there was a bit of delay in our call, so if there's some overlap in our voices, that's why. But anyways, let's jump into this conversation with Nick Schuetze.
Nick, how are you?
I'm good. I think I might have a slight cold. I've still got some sinus pressure and stuff, but other than that, I'm pretty good. Yeah. How are you, Thomas?
Doing well. Yeah. Happy to be talking with you.
Yeah, it's good to
Are
chat
you
with you.
in, yeah, are you in Portland?
Yeah, I grew up outside of Hillsboro, up on a hill called Ball Peak, and yeah, I'm out here for about a week. So yeah, normally I'm in Colorado. So normally when I look out the window, I don't see clouds or fog, but here that's the norm. So, but there's also a lot more green here too, so that's kind of fun.
Do you travel a lot?
Yeah, yeah, I guess I do. It's funny because I don't think I do, but every probably on average it's every 2 to 3 months I'm gone for a week or more. Um, yeah, working with college athletes at UCCS with track and field and cross country. Travel to different races with those guys. Mostly it's the cross country season. So we were at nationals in Joplin, Missouri, and before that we were down in Texas for regionals. You know, stuff like that. But then I'm also traveling for Athletes in Action work. So part of why I'm out here in Oregon is because I grew up out here, and I have a home, like a church I grew up in, that I'm going to be sharing for about 10 minutes about what ministries look like, and yeah, where I'm headed, or where I feel like God's leading me. So
Sounds really cool. Can you tell us more about what you do with Athletes in Action?
yeah, I'd be glad to. So Athletes in Action is an organization, it's a worldwide missions organization. And one of the things that we aim to do or long to see, I guess is a better way to say it, and work towards is seeing a Christian, somebody who's a Christ following believer on every team and every sport and every place around the world, so that everybody who is involved in sport would know somebody who loves Jesus. And so my role within that is I'm in the track and field department, and it's a small department. We're always accepting interested people, but yeah. So we focus on track and field, and for me, I grew up as a distance runner. Always loved running. Um, Even when it was given as punishment, it was like I wanted to see how far I could push it. Push myself, my body. And I get to use running as an avenue to connect with people, mostly men, and help them to know the God that made them, and whether that's something new to them or something that they are growing in that relationship with God. That's my job, is to help them know and love God and walk with Him the rest of their life. Be prepared to do so. So yeah, it's really cool to be able to use sport as not just a way to get exercise in, not just a way to feel good, but also as a way to create relationships that that have transformed me, and I want to see these guys transformed as well.
When did you start running?
It was third grade. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm 42. I just turned 42 last month, and I know I was running in third grade. Had a teacher at the local elementary school who, I don't know if he somehow got around teaching some, or or what happened, but like 2 or 3 times a week, he would have us go outside, and it wasn't during our PE time; it was separate. And we could walk, we could jog, or we could run. And I wasn't the fastest guy, that's for sure. But yeah, I found that I really enjoyed running along with my best friend Nathan at the time. So yeah, it's pretty good. They also, this is cool. They the elementary school, they had lists for each year of how fast you ran the mile. They had a mile. Um, in a sense, it was a time trial, but I mean, every kid in the school would run the mile, and they just had this list, and then they'd have awards for the fastest people in each grade and that sort of thing. So I remember when they were giving out the awards, and I think I was like a fifth grader, and our elementary school went to sixth grade. Like Clayton Hanchett went like 6 minutes and 8 seconds. I'm like, that's incredible. I don't remember what I ran as a fifth grader, but it wasn't that fast. I know that.
Uh, but you were pretty successful in high school and college, ran for the University of Portland. Um,
Yeah.
what do you remember about that experience?
Um. Well, yeah, it's a broad question. I remember lots of stuff, but some highlights. Uh, One of my highlights is my high school coach, Coach Chapman. He's still alive. He's taking care of his wife. And he's just a really solid man, in character. And I believe he was in the Marines. He was a high school history teacher. And yeah, he wanted us, he modeled like doing your best. And when I was going into my last year of high school, my senior year, the summer before, my dad wanted to move us to Colorado, ironically. Like, we're growing up in Oregon. He wants to move to Colorado, which now I know is like one of the best states for running in the country. And I was adamant, I'm not going. I'm not going to leave my coach. I'm not going to leave my friends. I'm not going to leave my teammates. And we didn't end up moving. But yeah, I really valued him as a coach and the guys and gals I get to run alongside. College, I knew I hadn't trained as much. Like, once I got into college, I knew I hadn't trained as much in high school as other people. And so it gave me a bigger window of possibility for improvement, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really enjoyed running indoors, which is crazy. I didn't expect to like that. Go to
Interesting.
University of Washington, Dempsey, and so comparing my elementary times or whatever, I probably ran like a 7-minute mile or something then. But I get down to 4:12 in the mile, which today's standards with fast like super spikes and all that, like, that's not incredible. But for a guy who, like, the fastest 400 I ever ran was like a 54 or something like that, I felt like that was pretty good. But yeah, was low 14s in the 5K, and I don't know, like 8:17 in the 3K. But yeah, 10K I never ran well. And all throughout high school and into my last year of college, I was super anxious in running, which is now seems like just an odd thing because I haven't felt that way in a long time. And my parents were gracious enough to take me to a sports psychologist. And in one like 2-hour session, we worked through a lot of stuff, and I was able to change some ways that I was thinking about things and what I was focusing on in races, and did some visualization stuff that I incorporated, and so I used to throw up at the line. I'd throw up in the middle of races and stuff, and that doesn't happen anymore. So not that I don't care about running, I just care in a different way, and I don't carry that so much. in my body. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. How did you work through that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of confusion. You're trying to figure out what's going wrong. At one point, I realized I was probably eating the wrong things. Um, so changed diet here and there, tried different things. But yeah, seeing that sports psychologist was really helpful. And the other thing that was really helpful was figuring out like how much what I was doing mattered. Because I think when you're young, you think, oh, like if you're good at a sport, you're going to put a lot of time into it. You might find a lot of value in that. And it becomes very easy to say, oh, I am, and you fill in the blank with your sport. I'm a runner. I'm a good runner, or something like that. It becomes an identity. And I know I did that. But I was also a Christian. And so during college, I got involved with Athletes in Action in the summers, and eventually started to understand how sport and faith could come together, and how I was more than a runner. Like running's too small of a thing to contain Nick Schuetze, which sounds somewhat ridiculous for me to say, but I just mean like for any one person, their sport is too small of a container to say, this is who I am. This is something you do. It's something you invest a lot of your time and emotion and energy to, but it's too small of a container to say, this is who I am. So yeah, now I would say, first and foremost, I'm somebody created by God for good things, and one of those things is just knowing Him and honoring Him with my life. And one aspect of that is running, and so and I can use this and connect to other people and help them do that well too, but not because I want them just to be a runner. I want to help them as a whole person, mind, body, and soul. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a common trap for people to fall into, this identity foreclosure, especially for young people. Like when they're being told that they're good at something, or people recognize them for being good at running, for example,
Yeah.
then yeah, it just flows into the narrative that they have about themselves. And yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on you to when your identity is based on like how you perform in sport. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, that's a profound shift to make. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, have you ever watched the documentary that Michael Phelps put together, The Weight of Gold, I think it's called?
No.
It's probably like an hour and a half long, but I remember watching, I think it's on HBO or something like that, so I had to get like a day membership or something. But yeah, he follows some summer and winter Olympic athletes and looks at like the build up and then going to the games and all their hopes and dreams, and now they have a big spotlight on them. They're on the world stage. They've made it to the games, and then maybe they medal, maybe they don't. But then the games are over, and yeah, they're an Olympian, but it's 4 years probably 4 years until the next games. And so are they going to try and do that again? And now the media is gone. All the buildup is gone. And they're left questioning, like, was it worth it? Like, what do I have to show for all of that time and that intention? And maybe you medaled, but it wasn't the medal you wanted. There's a coach I work with, Mark Mish, and he shares, Like I was just down at the Olympic Trials Marathon in Orlando a few days ago, and the day before he's like, Nick, there's going to be a lot of disappointment at this race. Yeah, a lot of people are glad they're here, but more often than not, people are hoping for something that doesn't happen. And there's only going to be one person that wins. There's only going to be 3 who get in the top 3 and hopefully are going to the Olympic Games, So, yeah.
Yeah.
I like what you said, though, identity foreclosure. I've never heard that term before, but I like that. Where'd you hear that? Or did you make that
When
up?
people start to foreclose on an identity and then it becomes theirs. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. What are people who helped you to understand how faith and running came together?
Oh, who are some of those people? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I remember anyone prior to working with Athletes in Action talking about that. I imagine like some of the FCA people that I kind of loosely went to FCA in high school. It was before class started on like a Wednesday, and I didn't want to wake up early. But I don't recall much there, but sometimes you have to hear things multiple times for it to sink in or for you to even register it. So that might have been the case for me. But yeah, in 2002, it was in between my sophomore and junior year of college. I had gone to I had decided I was going to go somewhere with Athletes in Action. The summer prior, I kind of just didn't have the faith to see God provide for me to go anywhere or do anything. And so I came back into my sophomore year after that summer, and I was dead set on like going somewhere, and I wasn't going to let fundraising or something like that get in the way. So I told my mentor, okay, I'm going, I don't know where, but help me get there. So I ended up going to the Czech Republic. I was over there for 3 weeks. It was a track tour with Athletes in Action. But for the week prior, we were in Ohio at a training camp, and I think we had baseball and basketball athletes who were going off to other places around the world too, or maybe domestically. And so we were doing this week of preparation, and we went through what's called the Athletes in Action Principles. And if anyone's interested in finding those, just go to athletesinaction.org and go to resources. You can download all the information on the principles.
We'll put a link to it.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. But like one of them is about motivation. One of them is about identity. And there's really practical pieces that you can draw out of them and utilize and practice within what you're doing. And so like one of them was like this idea of audience of one. Like it's your motivation for why are you doing what you're doing? So you're competing. Well, why? I want to see how fast I can go. Well, why? Because I want to see if I'm faster than my friends. Well, why does that matter? Because I want to beat them. I want to be faster. I want to be known. I want to be impressive. I want to matter. And running is a way for me to accomplish these things, maybe. And ultimately, like, most people are not going to find the satisfaction they crave. Or if they do, it's going to be for a time, but it's not going to last. And so you accomplish a goal, and now it's like, well, what's the next goal? And so like there's this ever-present resetting of goals. I'm going to shut the door real quick. Ever-present resetting of goals, I think, that can happen, where you're never you're never getting to enjoy or be satisfied by the accomplishments because there's always something else. And I remember hearing Ryan Hall talk about this one time at Altitude Project, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point, Thomas. But yeah, Ryan Hall was sharing about how he'd been at the Olympics and running with all these medalists and gold medalists, and they're always hoping for the next medal. You know, it's like, okay. I mean, and for those people, like, fast forward a couple of years, they're probably not sitting on a high of, I'm a gold medalist. You know, they're probably wondering, is my shoe company going to keep me on if I run a bad race? And how am I going to provide? And why aren't sponsors calling me anymore? You know, like stuff like that. It's like,
or just the next thing, like you said.
yeah. So, yeah, so this audience of one thing, you know, what's your motivation? And the idea is that who is the one person that can satisfy, like, who can help you understand what matters most, what you're made for, and satisfy all those things, and that's God. And so, and what is He doing as you're going through life? Like, if we might seek Him, and fix our eyes on Him, the author and perfecter of our faith, one who's created us and will sustain us. If we'll fix our eyes on Him, like, well, there's not a lot that can go wrong. I mean, yeah, like circumstantially things can go wrong, but ultimately we're fulfilling the what am I trying to say? We're fulfilling the purposes that were made for us, that we were made for. Relationship with God, relationship with others, and glorifying Him, and doing all these things that bring us joy in a way that other people might be confused by, but is really, really satisfying. And not just in the moment, but bring us joy that lasts. And so, like, one of the practical tips from that was, like, have some sort of focal point that brings you back into, in the midst of competition, that can bring you back into this mindset of, like, God has made me. He's given me this ability. He's given me this opportunity to be in this competition. You know, maybe He's given me a team or a coach or, you know, people to support me. So I'm here today and I can worship Him. I can honor Him in this performance. So how can I do that? Well, one is just thanking Him for all those things in the midst of it. And I can still focus and like run really hard in the midst of that, race really hard. But for me, like, my focal point would always be like a little strip of tape around my finger, usually my pointer finger, like just some athletic tape. Because number one, I never have anything there. So, like, having something there is like, oh, it reminds me. Wait, why is that there? And maybe put a little cross on it or a Bible verse or something. And so as I'm running, one, I see this little bit of white that's not usually there. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is God, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And it helps me be a better competitor too. So, I mean, I think we're all tempted to do things that we ought not do, you know? And so it's like, oh yeah, I don't need to, like, cheat or like do or like hit this person. You know, I can back off this person. If I'm crowding them, I might actually, you know, screw them up in the race. I don't want to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. But for me, like, it kind of takes my mind off of the difficulty of it. And it helps me, like, free up the energy that the mental energy that I'd be kind of like maybe dreading. Oh no, this is, you know, 5 more minutes of really intense running at the end of a 5K or something. I can now be like, God, thank you so much. And, you know, maybe I've listed out some things that I'm really thankful for before I go out and race. I can kind of think through that mental list of things and still be, like, working hard and trying to go around people or whatever. So
Yeah, and just having the perspective that you're significant and valued no matter what happens in the race, like how you
yeah,
perform or anything, that yeah, it just brings a sense of true peace and contentment. And then
Yeah.
a byproduct of that is that it gives your mind the freedom to focus on running hard and performing to the best of your ability.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, and I know you've gone through the principles a number of times, and I remember talking our mutual friend Chandler. I remember him telling me that you guys went through those together. So it was cool to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. The concept of focal points is brilliant. And I like your, yeah, the idea of the tape on the finger. What are some other focal points that athletes could use?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on like what sort of athlete you are. something something that's legal within the parameters of your competition.
True.
So, but I mean, yeah, let's say you're in a stadium or something. Maybe it's a flag. Like I don't know. I don't know. Like it could be anything. Something where when you see it, you have told yourself, this is what I'm going to think, right? Or this is where I want my mind to go. For me, it's easier if it's on my person or on my equipment that I'm using at the time. Like if I was a bicycle racer, I'd probably want something on my handlebar or something like that. But yeah, I think, I mean, we see, I think back to like Tim Tebow when he was playing football, for Florida, he'd have, Bible verses right underneath his eyes. And I think that was as much for him as it was for other people. But yeah, in terms of focal points, usually it's like me focusing on God. But it can also help other people focus on God too. But yeah, I don't know. Like, do you have some thoughts on that? I know you're asking the question, but I'm just curious if you have any other better ideas than I've shared.
Uh, yeah, I don't know, like a wristband or,
Yeah,
yeah, just riding something like on your hand.
yeah. I know. I mean, yeah. That brings to mind like people wearing a cross on their neck. I've never really liked wearing any sort of jewelry, so it's not that's not my thing really. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Hmm.
You can also put something. You can write things on. Like I've written stuff on my shoes before. Um, I remember this guy in high school, Corey Wilson. I don't know where he's at now, but on his shoes he would write TBT. Oh, let me think. To God be the glory. TBGTG. Yeah. And he knew what it was, and if somebody would ask him, he would say, "Oh yeah, it's to God be the glory." You know. Um, so maybe there's sometimes a dual purpose in those things, but I don't think he was looking at his shoes when he was racing.
Yeah,
That usually gives you problems.
yeah. But you see it when you put them on, like when you change into your
Yeah.
racing shoes. So
Yeah.
that's a good one
Exactly.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the principles were a big part of your spiritual growth.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of putting faith and sport together, another really big one was Altitude Project, which I alluded to earlier, and that was, um, or that is, a running camp that takes place in Mammoth Lakes, usually the end of July, beginning of August. And in 2005, beginning of the year, my best friend Chris Olinger told me, he had been a Christian for all of 2 years, I think, at that point, maybe three. And he'd been through a lot growing up, and I could see God was changing him, but like he'd kind of resist. You know how sometimes you know what's good and right to do, and you just resist doing that? Well, he finally got to a point where he's like, I'm going to take a step forward, and I really think God wants me to do something this summer. And I was like, okay, well, you figure out where you're going, and I'll go with you. Doesn't matter. I'm with you. And yeah, he was the closest guy on my cross country team to me, like me and him. And so he found the Altitude Project through Athletes in Action. So I guess it was a toss up between that and going to like Togo or something like that. He didn't want to go overseas, so high altitude running camp in California. We're going to be down there for 3 weeks. And so, yeah, we road tripped it down there. And it was the first time I'd ever met somebody who loved God and loved running as much as, oh, we got thumbs up, all right, as much or more than me. And it was so cool. This guy named Greg Jimerson and Avery Blackwell, they had started the camp, and one of the hallmarks of it for me was each week we had like an hour with one of the camp staff. And so I got to meet with Greg Jimerson, and he's like, so tell me about yourself, and like, how'd you end up coming? And I was like, yeah, I mean, Chris wanted to come, and so I said, I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I'm going. Because I wanted to see him grow in his faith. He also knew that he'd probably have to share a bit about his past, and he was a little afraid of doing that with people he didn't know. But yeah, it was kind of cool to see that. So yeah. But yeah, that was a really big part of it too. Like talking with Greg and hearing him and Avery and Katie and all these other people share about what God had done in their lives and what God was still doing, and how he had drawn them to himself, and how running, or really just athletics in general, and faith came together. So they weren't focused so much on doing the principles, but they were like we were going through different themes each week or each camp, and we're learning about and integrating like faith and sport within those talks, which is really cool. So, and I liked that it wasn't just Bible study stuff. It wasn't just a talk. It was, hey, here's a training tidbit, and let's talk about rest and recovery. Here's a training tidbit. Let's talk about injury, like prevention and then recovery. Oh, here's another one. Let's talk about how to use technology to improve what you're doing. And so a lot of practical stuff, but also like there's practical stuff in terms of what we're learning about from the Bible. And yeah, so like we were learning about them, but they were together in the same place, so it's good.
So then, yeah, after that you took on more of a leadership role at Altitude Project. You were a camp director. So what motivated
that
you
didn't happen
to
right away.
take on that role?
yeah, it took a while. So 05 was there as a camper. 06, same thing, but then the last week I asked if I could stay an extra week, and I just did some stuff to help out, and then I got in touch with the leadership and was like, I'd really like to help with this. I wasn't in college anymore. I was teaching high school math and mostly science, physics, and but I really wanted to be involved with Altitude Project moving forward, and so I started being a part of the process of developing the theme for the week, and I put together a talk, and I think I might have put together a couple talks. Maybe it was just one on the theme, and then later on it would be some of the training tidbits and stuff. But yeah, being a science teacher, it's like I learned a lot about the body, anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, athletic training, all this stuff, and it's like I did that because I wanted to learn it, but I also wanted to I like helping people. And so especially runners, it's like, okay, I've learned all these stuff. I'm incorporating this. I want to help you know how to do that too, you know? So, but yeah, it wasn't until, probably like 2015 or 16 maybe, that a guy named Paul Davis, who had led for a year or two, was like, yeah, I can't do this any longer. I need somebody else to take this over. And so me and Rachel did that, and probably 2015. So we did that for a while, and then we've passed it on to another couple. Well, Rachel and I are not a couple, just to clarify, she's married. But yeah, there's a couple, Tyler and Callie Werner, and they're down in Houston. They're doing a great job with it, leading it now. So, but yeah, like, it's just interesting because all along I've had this desire, like I've shared, I love helping people, and going to altitude and training. I've always loved it. I did it in high school at this like high school running camp called Steens Mountain Running Camp in Eastern Oregon. And so having a Christian specific, hey, we want to help you grow in discipleship, in community. You know, we'd always say it was like growing spiritually, physically, and socially. You know, not necessarily in those orders or whatever, but like that's what this is about. That always appealed to me. I always like getting to know new runners, you know, and I always like taking people on runs that they've never been to. I like being hospitable and inviting people in, and inviting them into more and more of what is good and right for them. So Altitude Project is a great place for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. What is the impact that you've seen it had on athletes?
Well, I know there's been some people come to faith. There's been a couple times where we've had a pastor there with us, and he really felt like he should talk about baptism, and so I've seen people baptized. But I mean, so those are some like pivotal moments in people's walk with God, or can be.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to faith is always pivotal, but
yeah.
But yeah, I would say, like, for Chris Olinger, it was an opportunity for him to test and see that God's family of believers would treat him the same way that the people he knew back at University of Portland would. That he'd be met with grace, that he'd be accepted, that his past didn't define him. And through that, I know that Chris still wants to be a pastor. He's gone through a lot of trainings and stuff through his church and that sort of thing. And I mean, that sort of development, that sort of vision, that sort of, you know, like, there were distinct things that needed to happen back in 05 and 06 when he went again, that helped him take the steps to get to where he's at now. And yeah, I think for myself, I went, and one time, like, I was spending money really, really poorly, and I'd bought this car on credit and didn't need it, and I drove that car to Altitude Project, and I was so convicted that I had this car. I shared with everybody, I'm like, I am not supposed to have this car, and I'm going to go home and sell it. And I did, and God provided for that to happen in a really awesome way. Sold it to a friend of mine in the Air Force. And so I don't know, like, connecting people who have stayed connected through, like, over years and years and years. Some of my best friends I know from Altitude Project. I can say that. Greg Jimerson, his wife Melanie, Avery Blackwell, who I don't talk to that much, but I can have a conversation with him that goes on for a long time, because we've had all these experiences together, you know. Paul Davis, I talk to him regularly, you know. And then other people, wow, we're really getting the celebration going on here. We gotta learn how to do these.
Went up on your screen.
I know. It's like, I think they must use Zoom, because it's all the same stuff. Anyway, so yeah, like Paul Davis, but then other people I know from like a rival school, University of Washington. Like, I'm really good friends with Mike Sanko, and I never would have known him if I hadn't gone to camp with him. Mark Mandy. Man, there were all these guys that were in a small group together, and I got to know them. And I have stayed at probably all of those guys' houses at one time or another. Yeah. So, I don't know. There's just something cool about being in a place where you know that people like yourselves want to grow in their faith and love running. You know, there's a lot of overlap in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really neat environment to develop friendships, as you spoke to.
Yeah. And I think post-collegiately, those are the types of friendships that, for me, I really needed. I was able to run at the Olympic trials in the marathon in 2007, and part of that, I wouldn't have had a mind to even go for it had I not met people who were going for it at Altitude Projects. And it probably sounds crazy at this point in time, because, like, who doesn't know about the marathon or the trials, that sort of stuff. But when I was in college, like, the internet wasn't, YouTube didn't exist. Just let that sink in. You know, like, you couldn't watch video online because you didn't have the bandwidth to download it. There was no way for that to happen, really. And so, and there weren't that many people posting stuff online. It was very, very new. Like, I got my first email account outside of AOL. Well, no, my parents had an AOL email account. I never used it. But I got my first email account in college, I think. And so, anyways, like, just that sort of stuff, like, there wasn't a whole lot of information. But going to Altitude Project, I met these guys, and like, yeah, we're going for the trials. I'm going to do the marathon. I'm like, marathon? I know my aunt, like, walked one. What does it even look like, you know? And so I met a couple coaches there as well, so I talked to them, and a couple of years later, I was well prepared to train for and made it. But had I not had those critical conversations, critical connections, I never would have had the know-how or the means to get there. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it drove you to be, a better runner, get the best out of yourself, and also a better follower of Christ.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely a better follower of Christ and a better runner, because, you learn all these things about, like, tips and tricks, and like the 1%ers or whatever you want to call it, for how to do things well, how to stay healthy longer, prevent injury and all that stuff.
That's bigger than 1%.
Yeah. So I went to Cameroon back in September. Never been there before in my life, but Athletes in Action took some coaches over there, and I could talk more about that, but just this one little bit. This one coach from Texas down at Laternal University was sharing about you being 95% trained is so much better than being 100% injured. And really, any injury is you're 100% not running, or you're preventing some sort of training from happening, right? So, I really liked hearing that, because, it's a practical way of, or it's a pragmatic way of thinking about training and that, getting to the edge of injury, like how far can I push myself? Well, don't push too hard because you definitely don't want to be injured.
Yeah. The
So,
risk reward is too great to be on that line.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless you've got some of the best people in the world working with you and, your life revolves around it and you've got all this sponsorship money and, it's between silver or gold or, stuff like that. It's like, yeah, most of the time it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Can't cut it too close. So.
Right. So you said that helping people has always been a big part of your vision and what you want to do. Um, I'm just curious, how would you describe your purpose in life?
Yeah, my purpose is to glorify God with all that I do. And um, the things that are big in my life, um, the things that I feel like God has given me experience and ability or drive to do, is involved in endurance sports. So using endurance sports to connect with people so that they can learn more about God and grow in that relationship. And what I think is kind of like there's two things that late in the last few years have kind of been bigger in my mind when I think about God and just our generation and our world and all that. Number one has to do with community. So like God's given me the desire to be hospitable. I love cooking with people or for people. I love having people over to my house. I don't do it all the time, but like I love it when there's a bunch of people in the house. And fostering places where people can be together and live in harmony and grow together is something I love. And so doing that with a Bible study or just doing that because we're having a game night or even just a meal together, something I love. And there's a verse in James 5:16, and it has to do with like Christians, and that's like confessing your sins to one another so you can find healing. And like, how can you get to a place where you can be transparent with people about the things that are dark and bent and screwed up in your life if you haven't spent time with them and come to appreciate them and trust them and know who they are, right? And so that's what we need is places and spaces in our lives where we can be known by others and we can get to know people. And so that's something that I feel like God's helped me with a lot. And I said there were two things. The other one is escaping my. Oh, it's like this idea of abundant life, and pop Christian culture will twist this, but one of the words that is used for like life in the Bible is this word Zoe, and I could be saying it wrong, but it's not just like we're saved to eternal life or whatever. It's like we're saved to this overwhelming, incredible, full, rich life. Like if you've ever had, let me think. If you've ever had like different kinds of vanilla ice cream, there's like the super cheap, kind of chunky, crusty, like not smooth, vanilla. And then there's this like super creamy, like with these really awesome layers of flavor. Maybe it's got the vanilla beans like all, within it. And you can have like one little bit of it and you're like, wow, this is awesome. And the other one's like icy and like it's like flavored milk almost, you know. And they're both vanilla ice cream, but one of them has an abundance. And I love that idea of like, God doesn't just save us to be saved. He's saving us into abundant life. And that doesn't mean we get everything we want. He's the one that defines what that is. But if you look throughout the Bible, we're made for relationships. We're made for worship of Him. And He delights in us, and He delights in when we're walking with Him. And there's so many times where I have just been in these wonderful places of community where maybe I have a lot, maybe I have a little. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But there's something so wonderful in being known by people and knowing other people. And yeah, it's just a joy. And so it's this overwhelming, like, abundant life. I don't know how else to say it. So kind of combined together, you know.
So how did you discern your call to ministry?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, well, in my experience, God is persistent, and you may not understand things right away, but over time, more often than not, I feel like there's been some consistency to things. And so, like, just a really quick thing, I was going to go to college to be an engineer because I thought, oh, I like math and science, and money sounds good, you know? And then first semester, I realized, oh, I had this ongoing, I don't know, it was a vision or a dream or something, I'm not sure, but this recurring thought that was like, oh, it's going to be really lonely being in a cubicle just running numbers and calculating things and all that, you know? And I knew I liked engaging with people and helping people. And I didn't see how engineering fit that. And I can see how it can now, but I switched to education for that purpose, so I could teach, and so I could have connections and hopefully help light bulbs come on for people. So, I mean, early on, in some ways in my life, when I was out of my parents' household, I started making choices that were in line with who God's made me. Nobody was telling me, oh, you'd be a good teacher. You know, it was like, oh, this makes more sense. This is a better fit. Not that engineering wouldn't have been fun. I think it could have been really fun. So going back to your asking about calling, I remember distinctly one morning, I was at home, I think it was a Saturday morning or something, and my mom had been reading in the Bible, and she's like, oh, you know what? I never noticed this before, but it says that your firstborn is a son, he's holy unto the Lord. And I'm like, okay, probably in high school or something. She's like, oh, I wonder what that means for you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't, you know, like, I just felt like sort of embarrassed and like confused, and I'm like, I don't think I want that, you know. And then she's like, well, maybe you'll be a pastor someday, or, you know, who knows. Like, it was a passing comment, but I remember that moment for some reason that stuck in my mind. Fast forward to, I'd been teaching for 9 years. I left the profession because I was taking classes in counseling. Realized I wasn't stuck in education. I didn't love it. I liked it, but I didn't really like it that much anymore. And felt like I didn't need to be there anymore, but I wasn't sure what was next. And so I moved to Georgia, worked with a friend from Altitude Project, Jay Stevenson. And down there, it gave me, like, being in a place I'd never lived before, So I lived in Oregon for 30 years, Colorado for 2 years, and then now I'm in Georgia. And I met all these other new people. I knew some people down there from Altitude Project already. And it gave me space to kind of think kind of anew, or maybe in fresh ways, and be thinking about, well, what should I do? You know, like the job I was doing was a sales job, which I'd never really done before, and I wasn't super successful at it. But yeah, I had time to think and pray and just, you know, like be open to what God would have. And so one of the guys I was doing this long run with, Wilson. Wilson's a great guy. We went did the approach trail to the AT, the Appalachian. I don't know how to say it from the East Coast anymore, but Appalachian Trail. I know I'm saying it wrong. Some people know what I mean. And on the way back, or maybe it was on the way there, he's like, you know, what's that?
I don't. I lived on the East Coast. I don't know.
It's like Appalachian Trail or something. I don't remember. But yeah, on the trip over to the trail, we were talking about Altitude Project, and Wilson's like, Nick, why don't you just do that for your job? Like, why don't you just be like a minister to athletes? And I was like, well, yeah, but Altitude Project's not going to pay my bills. You know, there's no way that could work. But that stuck in my mind. And then I was talking to Chris Olinger, my best friend from college. It was like January, February, and I had moved out to Georgia in September. And I knew at that point that I was going to move back to Oregon and work with my dad, uncertain about my future. And I'm telling Chris, yeah, I don't want to be a teacher anymore, but I don't know what to do. I don't have the money to go to school because I don't want to go back into debt for this master's in counseling, but I enjoy helping people. And Chris is like, why don't you just do Athletes in Action or Crew? Campus Crusade for Christ. And I was like, I don't know. Well, maybe. And my thought process was like, that's a lot of money to raise. And I think that was my biggest concern. It wasn't, would that work? Would that make sense? It was like, wow, I'd be solely dependent like every month on people giving. That sounds crazy. But what it did for me is, because Wilson had said something, and Chris Olinger, two guys who don't know each other, independent of each other, friends of mine, both kind of saying the same thing, it got me thinking, okay, well, I should probably talk to some people within AIA and Crew and just see what is it like. And so I knew a few people. I'd been sponsoring this one girl for, I don't know, at this point, 7 years or longer. And called Dane Strobel. I called probably my old mentors from college. And the recurring theme, and then they connected me to other people, the recurring theme that I kept hearing was like, Nick, if this is what God wants, He's going to provide. You just got to go out and do the work. He's going to provide. And so that helped me say, okay, I will apply. And this sounds like it could work. And I asked about, like, what if I did it halftime or something, and that wasn't going to make sense. There wasn't enough. I needed benefits, you know, healthcare benefits and all that stuff. So, but yeah, so since I applied in 2015, my application was accepted, and so I went to new staff training right at the beginning of 2016. So for a month, I lived in a hotel right by the beach. It was really hard. This is an old hotel, actually. It wasn't that hard. I ran on the beach with the sun coming up, and it was glorious. Yeah, so many ways it was just confirming to me that I was in the right spot. I was 34 at the time, so that was 8 years ago now. And yeah, it was really, really cool to be around all these 20-somethings who are jumping right in, and we're all excited. And I had this experience of almost a decade of teaching and helping out with Altitude Project and, all these different things. And I'm like, this is it. This is great. And one other bit that kind of connects it all as well is in March of 2012, before I moved to Colorado to be a teacher out there, I was in this job in a low high school that was really, really difficult. And I just went home emotionally drained every day, pretty much. And I was taking this class at my local, not college, but church, on leading a small group. And they asked us to pray over 4 different questions and take 15 minutes per question and just kind of spread it out over the week. And I'm like, I'm going to just take an hour and pray for them. And so I did. And the questions were like, what has God given you? Talent, ability, hopes, dreams, experience, and even like struggles within. How might God use these things for His glory? So that's the second question. Third one was, who might you join or have joined you in doing these things? And then the last one was, what is a sample mission statement for it all? And I found it really interesting praying through all that, because at the time I had spent 7 weeks in Colorado, a couple years, like 5 years prior to this, when at the end of college with Athletes in Action in Colorado. And my aunt and uncle lived in Colorado, so I've been there a couple times, different times. But I'm going through this hour of prayer, and Colorado is just blowing up in my mind. Boom, 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 boom. And I still have the journal. It's not like I bolded Colorado, but I really felt after that hour like God wanted me to move to Colorado. So one of the few times in my life where it was like very clear in prayer, open-endedly kind of with God, that there's some distinct thing, and this is a big thing, that I needed to do. And I knew my job was going to get cut. That's the other thing I didn't say. I knew my job was going to get cut because of budget problems in Oregon. So I needed to find a job probably out of Oregon that was going to be more stable. And but some of the things that I felt like God had said, hey, this is what I want you to do in Colorado, is minister to athletes and coaches, and pursue counseling, and as a profession or something you're interested in. And I don't remember the other ones, but it wasn't until 2017, when I was living in Colorado working with Athletes in Action and crew, that I realized God had fulfilled all those things in the span of 5 years. And it wasn't like I saw it as a target that I was headed for, but He had set it as a target. And I realized that as I walked with Him, that's where I ended up. And so, I don't know, like, to answer your long-winded question, a long-winded answer to your question of my calling, yeah, there's a lot of little bits, but they all kind of pushed me in the same general direction to do this. So
That's awesome how God kind of grew that idea in your mind, and how He used your connections to reinforce that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up, what are some things that athletes can do to help grow their relationship with the Lord and integrate faith and sport?
Oh, well, I think one thing, man, there's so many things that come to mind. Well, number one, I would say get in the Bible. Paul does a great job of writing and using metaphors involving athletics. And he talks about faith, and then he talks about running or beating my body, or boxing or something, or running a race. And so take an assessment of what's being said and what it actually means. because he's talking to people a lot of times, like the Isthmian Games and like Asia Minor. Like there were these games that were happening, so people are familiar with it. Dude, there's sports all over in our culture, so we get it. We know about sport. So go back to your Bible and see what is Paul addressing when he's using these metaphors of sport. I really think that people read and interact less with the Bible than, and this is a dangerous word to use, than they should. I think we're easily distracted, and I think we could really get excited about stuff if we gave ourselves the time to do so. So that's one thing, like get into it, but also like talk about it. Ask questions of people that you know, or people that you think would know about, like, how do faith and sport come together? And if you're not satisfied with their answers, find somebody else to talk about too, or like kind of dig in and say, hey, I want to know why you're saying that. Let's find this in the Bible and let's figure this out. I alluded earlier to these resources we have called the principles at Athletes in Action. Those are great. I mean, there's videos to watch, there's curriculum to go through, and it's really well thought out. And even, I'm not sure if they're on Amazon, but we have little booklets that are now Bible studies, and I believe there's 5 or 6 or 10 studies per principle, and there's 5 principles. So, I mean, there's lots of resources there if you want to just grow. But I suggest that you involve other people. Because we live in a culture that says, well, just figure it out for yourself, mostly. And that's not what you're designed to do. Like, we're designed to have community. So, involve some other people, and ultimately it's all going to point back to His Word. That's what I would suggest. And, if there's Athletes in Action in your area, great. Like, plug into them. If there's Crew, plug into them. If there's FCA, plug into them. All great organizations. And I don't want to be remiss by saying plug into your church, because, like, ultimately, I think some of the closest connections you can have with other Christians are going to be found in churches. And it's a place to get that weekly fellowship, worship, corporate worship. It's a place to know how you can give unto the Lord with your time and your talents and your money, and you can interact with people that aren't so wrapped up in sport. Maybe they see things a little differently than you, which is a good thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so read the Bible. Yeah, do it with other people. Get involved with community. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are some opportunities that athletes can learn more about, and where can they learn more about those with Athletes in Action?
Yeah, well, athletesinaction.org, and if you go up to the top, oh no, I'm forgetting exactly what the tab is. I believe
we can put a link to it.
It's teams. Or no, it's get involved. Get involved. And so there's tons of different, you can go by sport, by campus. There's different camps on there. But if you just go athletesinaction.org / no, that's going to be too hard to. Yeah, if you can put this up there, just you find find the link for track and field. Our track and field site has all the places that we're going this summer. And one of the things that I'm doing that I'm really excited about is something similar to the Altitude Project, and I'm calling it Colorado Endurance. And we're going to spend, like, athletes who are in college over the summer. A lot of times they need jobs, or they've got schoolwork to work on, that sort of thing, and it sometimes limits what you can do, where you can go and how you can train. So what I'm offering is an opportunity to come to Colorado Springs, to live in community with other athletes, to grow spiritually in the evenings during the week. But during the day, you've got time set aside for work, school, internship, that sort of stuff. Or if you don't have one of those, you're going to be serving in some way. And there's plenty of places to serve in our community. Excuse me. And then training is built in as well. But come run at altitude, grow in community, grow spiritually, and come for a month. There's not too many reasons to not come. And I would love to have people come and join us. So Colorado Endurance, do a little search for that and see what you think. So we're also taking athletes. There's something called Tough Camp, TUFF. It's a high school running camp in Holland, Michigan for a week. And you get to lead high school kids around for the week, wear them out. You're probably going to get worn out a little bit too, but it's going to be so wonderful. And that's where you and I met. What was that, 2018, I think? So that was pretty cool. And then from there, Tim's still taking people over, my boss, Tim Ellis, still taking people over to Switzerland. And so this summer, if you're an elite athlete and you don't want to work with some Olympic-bound people in Switzerland, gorgeous place, that's an opportunity, but you got to go to Tough Camp first, and then you can go over. So a lot of cool opportunities there. And then for coaches and athletes, we're going to take a trip to Togo, I think. I can't remember. It's a trip that just got added, and I don't have it here on my thing. So, anyways, it's something I can tell you more about another time. But that'll be in July. So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of good opportunities. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's been great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Thank you so much for the time. See ya.
I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. If you have questions about the Altitude Project or anything from this conversation, reach out to us at altitudeproject@gmail.com or on Instagram @altitudeproject. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share this episode with your friends and on social media. Thank you to those who support the Altitude Project with your finances and prayers. Your support is crucial to the project and plays a significant role in the Great Commission. Lastly, let us know how you are challenged, inspired, or encouraged by these conversations. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, peace.